The 2000s were packed with box office disasters most of us have totally forgotten. You've got a superhero comedy so terrible Marvel actually sued the studio. Even a Will Ferrell movie that bombed so hard Universal's president publicly apologized. Studios really want us to forget these flops ever happened, but let's dig them up anyway. Universal thought bringing back the 1970s TV show Land of the Lost would be a good idea for a huge Will Ferrell summer movie. Originally, it was supposed to cost around $125 million, but after their earlier movie Evan Almighty went way over budget and bombed, Universal got scared and cut costs back to about $100 million. They still went all out promoting this thing, partnering with Subway, Marriott Hotels, Pop Rocks, and even lunch meat companies. Those companies together blew $30 million on ads and tie-ins alone. Universal spent even more money on their own marketing campaign, and tracking was showing the movie would probably open around $30 million. But then the reviews hit, and they were brutal. Opening weekend, it landed in third place, way behind The Hangover and Pixar's Up. Honestly, how was this ever going to beat those movies? Audiences hated it just as much as critics, gave it a terrible C+ cinema score, and it completely bombed internationally too. All told, Universal had to write down around $80 million in losses. Studio head Ron Meyer actually admitted publicly, Land of the Lost was just crap. I mean, there was no excuse for it, we misfired, we were wrong. And the funny thing is, a couple of days ago, Netflix actually announced Land of the Lost series reboot. Guess they didn't learn from that one. Tim Allen stars as a washed-up superhero forced to train a bunch of teenagers with superpowers to save the world. Yeah, it's basically X-Men but worse. Cast included Courtney Cox, Chevy Chase, Kate Mara, but Sony knew they had a total turkey on their hands. They refused to screen it for critics, never a good sign, and when reviews finally leaked out, they were awful. At one point, it even had a rare 0% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Marvel and Fox actually sued Sony before they even started filming, claiming the movie ripped off X-Men. Sony eventually shifted the release date to avoid clashing with X-Men: The Last Stand and made some minor script changes. But nothing helped. Tim Allen kind of blamed the studio's decisions for this one. I helped write that movie. It was much darker originally, but the studio forced us into making it a family film. It bombed spectacularly. Just $12.5 million at the box office from a $75 million budget, and Allen got nominated for Worst Actor at the Razzies. Pretty embarrassing all around. This one had big names. Barry Levinson directing, Bruce Willis back when he still had hair, Billy Bob Thornton, Cate Blanchett. It's a dark comedy caper about bank robbers who kidnap a woman, then both fall in love with her. The story's actually loosely based on two real-life bank robbers, and some details, like breaking into a bank manager's home and even giving a soda to their hostage, actually happened in real life. Cool trivia, but didn't help the box office one bit. MGM really thought this could be a hit. They even did sneak previews to build word of mouth, expecting at least a $20 million opening weekend, but the marketing was weirdly confusing. Nobody knew if it was supposed to be funny or dramatic. So opening weekend, it landed way below expectations, just $13 million. The studio even tried blaming anthrax scares and terrorism fears for people not showing up, except none of that stopped Training Day from being a big hit that same weekend. MGM had signed Bruce Willis for 2 movies and planned more after, but after this bombed and Willis's next movie Heart's War tanked too, they quietly canceled all future projects with him. Warner Brothers decided, for some reason, they needed yet another remake of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Oliver Hirschbiegel directed it originally, and filming finished back in 2005, planning a 2006 release. But Warner Brothers hated his cut so much they completely took the movie away from him. The Wachowskis came in to rewrite parts of the script, and V for Vendetta director James McTagg was brought in to reshoot huge chunks of it. They added bland action scenes, jacked the budget up another $10 million, and pieced it back together, finally releasing it in late summer 2007. Audiences had already heard about all the behind-the-scenes mess, so nobody wanted to see it. Reviews were mostly negative, tracking numbers were terrible, and opening weekend it crashed hard against Superbad. The cinema score was a miserable C rating from viewers. All told, after home sales and everything, the studio ended up losing almost $60 million. Massive disaster. Total waste of Nicole Kidman, who alone cost them $16 million. Back in 2003, Paramount had a terrible year. They put out these expensive, big-budget movies like The Core and Paycheck, and they just kept bombing one after another. And Timeline, based on a Michael Crichton novel, was one of the biggest flops of all. Paramount actually got the rights from Crichton for free, but he had this tricky back-end deal that was supposed to pay him and the director Richard Donner big money if the movie turned a profit. Spoiler alert, it didn't, despite Paul Walker and Gerard Butler starring in it. If Paramount had bailed on making the movie, they would have owed Crichton $1 million anyway. Donner turned in his first cut, and Paramount's boss Sherry Lansing hated it, demanded a ton of edits, which delayed the movie's release multiple times. Eventually, they dumped it on a crowded Thanksgiving weekend against movies like Bad Santa and The Haunted Mansion. Critics trashed it. Audiences didn't care, even though awareness of the movie was pretty high. Everyone knew about it. They just didn't want to see it. It opened way down at number 8 at the box office, completely buried by holdover hits like The Cat in the Hat. Total disaster, financially speaking. Picture Christian Bale and Matthew McConaughey teaming up to fight dragons in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. Sounds awesome, right? Well, apparently not. The screenplay was actually sold way back in the mid-90s, but sat around unmade. Then Spyglass Entertainment, fresh off their Sixth Sense success, picked it up and poured a ton of cash into making this their next big blockbuster. Big mistake. Disney gave it a prime summer release, opening against weak competition like Road to Perdition. Audience awareness was actually pretty high. People knew about it, but critics weren't impressed, and the audience was basically just younger guys. It opened at number 3, pulled in just $15 million opening weekend, then collapsed. Spyglass lost around $70 million on this one. Basically, after their earlier hits like The Sixth Sense and Shanghai Noon, this movie nearly sank their entire operation. Harrison Ford and Liam Neeson starring in a submarine thriller directed by Kathryn Bigelow. Sounds like guaranteed box office gold. But no, it bombed spectacularly. Originally set up at working title, they dropped it because Universal was already making their own submarine thriller, U-571. Bigelow moved on to another film while K-19 sat in limbo. Eventually, a German company, Intermedia, stepped in and financed the entire $100 million budget, including an insane $25 million paycheck plus back-end points to Harrison Ford for basically 3 weeks of work. This budget was so huge, it seriously damaged Intermedia financially before the movie even came out. And things got way worse when it actually opened. Reviews were mixed, box office was terrible. Opened against movies like Stuart Little 2 and Eight-Legged Freaks, it barely scraped to number 4. Made just $30 million overseas too. Total disaster. This was a big turning point for Ford's career. He'd been reliable box office for 2 decades straight, but after this, he did Hollywood Homicide, another huge flop, disappeared from screens for a few years, and then came back with the disappointing Firewall. Also really hurt Bigelow's momentum. Her next movie, The Weight of Water, barely even got a proper release. For some reason, back in the early 2000s, anything with Mars in the title seemed destined to flop. Ghosts of Mars definitely kept that streak alive. Directed by horror legend John Carpenter, the movie was originally written as another Snake Plissken sequel, Escape from Mars, but after Escape from LA flopped, they rewrote it completely. It's basically Natasha Henstridge and Ice Cube fighting ancient Martian demons who've possessed a mining colony. Jason Statham's in this too, randomly. Carpenter basically lost interest during production. He's even said the movie was so draining and terrible, it made him step away from directing for nearly a decade. Ice Cube was actually brought in late to replace Jason Statham, who wasn't famous yet. But even Ice Cube hated the final movie so much he refused to promote it. Straight up said he couldn't lie and recommend something he personally wouldn't watch. The movie opened at the sleepy end of summer, dumped against random comedies like Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back and Summer Catch. Awful reviews, zero buzz, opened all the way down at number 9. Totally flopped. Pretty much ended Carpenter's Hollywood run entirely until he eventually made a small comeback movie, The Ward, 10 years later. Mark Wahlberg and Jennifer Aniston in an 80s rock comedy nobody asked for. Wahlberg's an office supplies guy by day, but he moonlights as the lead singer in a tribute band. Then out of nowhere, he gets chosen to front his favorite rock group. Sounds kind of fun, right? Well, it originally had Brad Pitt attached, but Pitt bailed over disagreements about choosing a director. He'd already dropped out of a similar role in Almost Famous. So instead, Wahlberg stepped in and Stephen Herrick signed on as director. Yeah, the guy who just bombed spectacularly with Holy Man. Warner Brothers moved the release date around a lot, April, then September, finally landing right after Wahlberg's Planet of the Apes remake that same summer. Critics absolutely destroyed it. Said it was a generic, predictable slog through every tired rock cliché you can imagine. Opening weekend, it had zero chance. It went head-to-head against The Musketeer, placed 4th, and just a few days later, 9/11 happened, making box office returns basically non-existent. Still, weirdly enough, Wahlberg says this is his favorite movie he's ever made. Go figure. On paper, sounds solid. Sylvester Stallone, Burt Reynolds, racing drama? What could go wrong? Well, behind the scenes, this one was a total disaster. It was financed by Franchise Pictures, famously shady studio, and German-based Entertainment. Entertainment sued Franchise Pictures in 2000 for basically inflating movie budgets, so Entertainment would have to pay way more than agreed. Franchise's owner created fake charges he called approved overages, claiming Driven cost $72 million, way above the real budget, which never actually got revealed. Entertainment eventually won that lawsuit for $77 million, bankrupting Franchise Pictures by 2004. And if that wasn't bad enough, they actually had this genius idea: bring back Renny Harlin to direct. Harlin was the guy who tanked Carolco Pictures with Cutthroat Island 6 years before this one. Warner Brothers barely promoted Stallone in the trailers after his previous flop Get Carter bombed earlier that year. The trailers looked incredibly cheap, like straight-to-video cheap. Despite everything, Driven somehow opened at number 1. But it didn't matter. Reviews were terrible, buzz was non-existent, and it bombed. Even today, its Rotten Tomatoes score is atrocious 14%. This one's got Tim Allen as a divorced dad trying to impress his daughter by standing up to a bullying coworker. Originally, it was supposed to be this dark, edgy comedy, but the moment Allen signed on, the studio took the original screenwriter off the job, ripped out all the dark humor, and turned it into a toothless holiday family movie. Screenwriter John Scott Shepherd openly hated the final result. Fox somehow thought they could release this against massive Christmas competition: Lord of the Rings, Ali the Majestic, even Jimmy Neutron. Reviews were awful, marketing completely flopped, nobody showed up. After a terrible opening weekend, Fox basically gave up entirely. Barely released it overseas, scraped together less than $2 million internationally. Total bomb. Martin Lawrence actually had 2 flops in 2001, and this one was especially bad. It's one of those dumb time travel comedies. Lawrence falls into a moat at the amusement park where he works, wakes up in medieval England, and gets mistaken for a messenger from Normandy. New Regency paid big money for the script, originally meant for Chris Tucker or Chris Rock, but eventually Martin Lawrence got cast after Big Mama's House made money. He scored a ridiculous $16.5 million payday for this garbage. They originally scheduled it for January 2002, but then made the insane decision to move it to Thanksgiving 2001 against Harry Potter's second weekend and new movies like Spy Game. Like, seriously, what were they thinking? It opened 4th, nobody cared, reviews were terrible, overseas markets barely touched it. It didn't even make back its advertising budget, let alone production costs. Second huge flop for Martin Lawrence that same year after What's the Worst That Could Happen completely tanked months earlier. Rob Cohen actually turned down directing the sequel to Triple X, which itself bombed spectacularly, to make this massive disaster instead. Sony threw over $130 million into Stealth, rushed it through development to make a prime summer slot in 2005. The story is about three pilots, Josh Lucas, Jessica Biel, Jamie Foxx, who have to stop a rogue, artificially intelligent fighter jet from starting nuclear war. Basically just Top Gun meets Space Odyssey, minus anything good from either movie. Marketing was everywhere, but audiences just weren't interested. And to make things worse, another big action film, The Island, flopped a week earlier, already draining enthusiasm for big-budget action movies that summer. Critics hated it, gave it an atrocious 13% Rotten Tomatoes score, and it flopped hard. Cohen himself later admitted publicly that unlike his hits Fast and Furious or Triple X, Stealth just wasn't any fun. Said clearly it was not entertaining moment to moment, exactly the kind of movie you don't want for summer.